Hi, this is Reg Athwal, and welcome to another episode of Family Business Experts, where I get a chance to interview experts and entrepreneurs on this show who can give us insights, learnings, ideas that can help us not only at a family level as well as a business level, but in some cases both. And my guest for today is an international recognized futurist and a dear friend I've known for 15 plus years now. Graeme Codrington, Dr. Graeme Codrington, that is one of the world's most sought after experts on the future of work and a lecturer for numerous top universities and business schools, including London Business School and Duke around the world. He's also been inducted into the Hall of Fame as a global certified speaker, which is the highest you could get in the global speaking industry. He's also got 5 degrees and he's got 6 best-selling books. And I know we can learn lots from Graeme today. Outside of this, he works in over 24 countries every year, impacting over 100,000 people annually, both in person and now obviously virtually. He's also an entrepreneur. He's one of the founders of a strategic consulting firm called TomorrowToday Global, and also the co-founder of the Future of Work Academy, which I can't wait to find out more about in this episode. So Graeme, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today, my friend, and welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Reg. It's great to join you. And I really hope my mother listens to that introduction. That sounded impressive. She always asks me when I'm going to get a real job, because...
Oh, there you go. And now what's real? I mean, if we've gone virtual, it's even more scary for parents. What are these people doing online?
No, exactly. What is your job?
So tell me, Graeme, I'm going to deep dive in straight away with the time that we've got, which is how does one acquire or end up having 5 degrees?
Well, I didn't set out to do that, but I'm a researcher by heart. I've always been passionate about trying to understand the world by immersing myself in studies and research and frameworks in particular. Mm-hmm. And so after my 2nd degree, I kind of just did an honors, a master's and a doctorate. And basically I would have been doing the work anyway. Right. And so I went and found out if there was somebody who would give me a certificate at the end of it to say that I had done it formally. So it wasn't really that I set out to be an academic. I'm not an academic. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business person, and I work with other business people, but I bring a particular focus around understanding frameworks. And yeah, as I say, 3 different universities were prepared to give me a piece of paper to say I'd done it.
Brilliant. I appreciate it. I mean, wow, I don't know of anyone else, in the world who's got 5 degrees. So I don't know whether you're going to add any more onto that list in the near future.
I am in the middle of another one as well. So yeah,
well, there you
can't
go.
help myself.
I think you're addicted to degrees. Other people stick to dark chocolate under the pillow, but never mind. So let's talk about what's going on around the world right now. I think, as a futurist, as a global expert yourself, I'm sure you're constantly doing research. You're looking at data. You're looking at trends. So talk us through what's going to change with the workplace. People are talking about the digital workplace. When we've spoken in the past, you've talked about the new normal. Can you give us some insights on what's about to change, what's already changing, and what does the next 10 years look like?
Sure. And you know what, if people are watching this in the year that we recorded it, 2020, obviously your starting point is COVID and there's a massive global disruption. But if we had recorded this 2 years ago, or if people are watching this in 2025 or 2026, the message would still be exactly the same. Honestly, I wrote a book called Leading in the Changing World last year. And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I reread it just to see, do I throw this book away now because COVID has changed so much that the world is different? Honestly, I wouldn't change a word in that book except to just add the word COVID in every now and then.
It's still relevant, completely relevant.
Because we've been trying to help our clients for the last 15 years understand that we do live in a deeply disruptive moment of history. Some eras in history, there is progressive improvement. So you have productivity improvement, you have efficiency improvement, you have the odd innovation here or there that just improves the world. But you don't have disruptive change. You don't have change where we were driving along one highway and now suddenly we take an off-ramp and we're going in a totally different direction. You do have this every now and again. Actually, interestingly, one of my first pieces of research, I think this is what I was busy with when we met 15 years ago, was on generational cycles.
Right.
And I know that that's hugely interesting and important in family businesses. Family businesses understand generational cycles more than anybody else, because you see as each new generation comes into the businesses have the potential to take new directions. And that happens about every 20 years or so. And so we were, before COVID-19, we were already in a deeply disruptive moment in history. And all of those disruptions are still there. So I could give you a little bit of insight as to what our team has seen about COVID and the fact that we think it'll be a 12 to 18 month disruption, whether that ends with a vaccine or kind of global herd immunity. Most pandemics over the last 100 years have taken a 2 to 3 year cycle with 3 or 4 waves. We could talk about that, but I think it's more important for business people right now to realize that this COVID disruption simply sets up all the other disruptions, and the 2020s are going to be one hell of a ride.
Can I ask you then, Graeme, when it comes to workforce, your people, what are you witnessing already, or what are you, what's the trends, what's the future look like when it comes to do we end up with more remote workers in the future? Should we downsize now? Should we become more leaner? Is there going to be certain people in the organization that will become obsolete in the future? Could you give us 3-4 key things that we should consider as owners right now for the future?
I think there are 3 high-level things, and then we can drill down into each of those and see, 10, 20 implications for each of them. The first would be the fact that we are in the middle of the greatest future of work experiment in the history of humanity, the work from home experiment. And all of those people who've been swearing blind, you can't work from home, or I refuse to let my staff work from home because they'll be lazy and they won't, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now we're in the middle of that experiment. And as I keep asking my clients, what happens if it works? Right. What happens if this actually does mean more productive, more engaged, happier stuff? So that's the first one. I think the second one has got to do with leadership. And in my mind, we have been for a while needing to shift to a concept of adaptive leadership. This is kind of knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. And most leaders in the world, most business leaders.
Say that once again, because it's very important. Knowing what to do when
you don't know what to do.
So you don't know.
Yeah. So no, but I mean, this is. Let's maybe pause here for a second to explain this, because I think this is absolutely vital. In business, there are 2 main types of leaders. The one is the technical expert, and the other is the adaptive leader. The technical expert, we meet all the time. This is a person or an environment where you know what the issue is. So sales are going down, staff engagement is not where it should be, you've got a competitor snapping at your heels. So what do? You sit down with your experts, your leaders who are clever, sharp people, maybe bring in a consultant or 2, and you all sit down and you diagnose the problem, and the problem is clear. You then put your brains to work and you come up with a set of solutions. You choose the best one. You allocate some budget to it. You then put the most experienced technical expert, the person who knows what they're doing the most, you put them in charge of the project, you roll it out, and you evaluate the success of it as you go along. That's business, right? That's what people do in business. That's what an MBA will teach you how to do. That's what most business strategy consultants will do. And if you get the big firms in McKinsey and so on, they'll roll that out for $1 million a shot.
I feel a buck coming after all this. Is there a buck coming?
Yeah, because that's technical expertise. Yeah. And it's brilliant when it works. So, you want a technical expert in charge when everything is predictable, when you know what the marketplace is doing. I want a technical expert in my doctor's office when I go to see my doctor. I want a technical expert in the CFO's office. I don't want my chief accountant making stuff up and coming to me saying, I don't really know what's going on around here. So I'm not saying technical expertise is not important. It's vitally important. But what happens, and Reg, I just want you to try and imagine a world. I know it might be quite difficult to picture this world where people don't really know what's going on, where we're not quite sure what the problem is, let alone what the possible solutions are. Even if we sort of vaguely agree on what the problem is, nobody can agree on what the right solution are. There are 10 different possibilities, and you can choose, let me be slightly cheeky, you can use the New York option, you can use the London option, you can use the Sweden option, you can use the Taiwan option, because there are so many different options. Nobody knows which is the right one, but you have to choose a lane. It's not a compromise situation where you can fudge it and go on multiple paths. You must choose a lane. And we're only going to find out in 3 or 4 years' time which lane was the right lane. We might discover there were 5 right lanes, but you still had to choose one. Then we can't agree on what type of expert we actually need in the system. And we fight with the experts that are experts in the system. I don't know if you can imagine a world like that, Rich, but in that kind of world, you need a leader who knows what to do when we don't know what to do.
Can I come in there for a second? I think, one of my favorite books in my library, which I reread recently and did a little book video online, and if whoever wants to watch it can go to the channel, it's there, was The Rise of Robots.
Yes.
And I remember reading a certain chapter where it talked about retail outlets, and we have many family business clients that are in retail that are suffering right now. And it was talking about this concept of having one flagship outlet, and at the back having all the delivery mechanism and robots, and everything's virtually done. So as I mentioned that, Graeme, what's popping up for me is, regardless of whether it's Sweden strategy, New York strategy, London strategy, what's happening around the world, even if there was no COVID, and COVID has shifted us into new thinking and new ways of operating, put COVID to one side, is there still a path which is clear for a futurist like you to say, these are things we should be doing anyway? Things have got faster. Our smartphones, I remember with an uncle of mine when I was 17, 18, to go and see his IBM mainframe computer, which was the size of my entire house. And now this thing is more powerful. So if we know these things already, and there's an evolution taking place, regardless of COVID, is there key things that we should be already doing now for our businesses?
Well, this is why I say adaptive leadership for me is one of the key themes that we've got, because adaptive leadership says, okay, if I accept the fact that I'm going to have to be making decisions in an environment where I don't have all the information, I don't even have all the information I wish I had, let alone all the information that's available, where things can change so quickly that a decision we made yesterday that was a brilliant decision is different today because the environment changed that fast. Then the question adaptive leadership asks is, what are the organizational design structures that you want to have in place? What are the leadership methodologies that you need to approach? What are the systems that will help you to do that? So, for example, you need to have self-organizing teams in an adaptive environment. You can't have centrally controlled systems where everybody's got to, where medium-sized managers ask big-sized managers to ask small leaders to ask the big leaders whether we can do this thing. You can't have that kind of hierarchical system anymore. You've got to change your
So does that mean people have to be trained up in how to self-organize? Because
absolutely,
some people are hopeless at organizing themselves.
Exactly. And adaptive leadership says, well, you can't just send a memo out and say to people, you can now make your own decision. You're a frontline person dealing with the customer, so you make your own decision about pricing. Of course you can't do that. it's not a binary situation where you just stop being a technical expertise driven company and you're suddenly adaptive. You've got to build the system throughout so that you trust everybody and they trust you, and that there are systems to back things up. But, let me give you a practical example, Reg, and let's maybe chat about this. So most companies I work with, and you tell me if it's the same with yours, they spend at least 2 months of their year working out their budget for the next year. So it's a massive process to go through a budgeting process. It can often be an internal competition between departments and regions, where they actually spend more time trying to finesse their own internal colleagues than they do looking at
the silo situation going on, and politics.
Yeah, and they play games because they put in extra budget because they know everybody's going to have to be reduced by 10%. The games we play, and we spend 2 months playing this game every single year. And then 3 months into the new financial year, we're ignoring the budget anyway.
Yeah.
Because we realize it wasn't really fit for purpose. Something pops up that nobody expected. An opportunity arises that we need to catch, which is why I prefer to work with CEOs, because CEOs have no budgets and completely ignore the budget anyway. I much prefer to work with a CEO who says, we need to do this, make it happen. And CEOs know they have that power and often abuse that power. And then everybody else in the system, the CFO chief amongst them, just freaks out. So any of this familiar?
Yeah, I mean, to come in there, I think, as best practice with family businesses that we deal with, we do go through that process of budgeting at board level. However, the real work is where we have a weekly rhythm, monthly review meetings that take place. We then build more accurate forecasts, especially around cash flow. As you know, with the whole crisis right now, it's all about the right inflow, managing your outflows in the right way. So if you can't see that with what's real, the budget's going to go out the window. And so for us, the budget is more, at least what's the end result that we want to achieve by December 31st of that year, if that's the financial year. But we know you've got to be nimble, and you keep using the word, adapting. I like that, being adaptive, being nimble, because in my opinion, and you could tell me, Graeme, whether this is correct or not, in my opinion, there's no longer this 1 year strategy or 1 year budget. It's dynamic. What do you think?
Well, so exactly, Reg. I'm exactly with you. So whether we use words, these are now going to be suitcase words, agile, lean, all of those systems are actually designed to build adaptive thinking into organizations, except they're often implemented without changing the organizational structure. So you've got these hierarchical structures with little lean scrums happening every single day, but those people haven't been given the authority that goes with the responsibility they were given in the lean system. And that's why lean doesn't work in some companies. So, whether you use adaptive, adaptable, lean, resilient, nimble, all of those words are the correct words. But here, and now we're answering your question. This is a sign of a great interview when you ask one question and it's 25 minutes later and we haven't fully answered it yet. What might never change? In other words, if COVID is just a catalyst, it is a crisis and there's all sorts of issues related to the crisis, but it is also a catalyst for the next 10, 20 years. I think there might be businesses who do exactly what you've done. We're talking budgeting as an example, but in their budgeting, they realize our annual budget is useless right now in the middle of the COVID crisis. Ignore it. What do we need to know? We need cash flow, actually, is the most important conversation. Always was, actually, but anyway, now we're having it more. So can we get our debtors to pay? Can we limit our creditors? What can we get out to clients? Are we going to give discounts? What are all of these things? All of these decisions are being made, and if they're made on Tuesday, they might be changed on Saturday because the situation is changed. I hope, will get used to working in this environment and realize it can be done. Actually, it might be better than the old system. And so my third thing, I said there were three things, so those people who are concentrating are going to know, well, what's the third thing? And the third thing relates to this. I don't think that we are going to go back to normal. Too many of my clients are using that language at the moment. Can we just, let's just grit our teeth, get through the crisis, get back to normal? I truly, honestly hope we never do. I hope we use this blank slate moment to say, what is the new, I know it's a cliche, but what is the new normal that we can build on the other side? And maybe that new normal has got to do with how we budget, which clients we're interested in servicing and which clients we'd rather say goodbye to. How we lead and manage people when we can't see them, whether we allow people to work from home, whether we need to travel across the world and have client meetings face to face, or whether a Zoom call is acceptable in some situations, etc., etc. Now, I think you can see the work that I'm doing at the moment is helping clients to think what's crisis and what's new normal emerging.
Can I ask you, Graeme, just going back for a second with, we talked about cash flow. You know, I was reading an article this morning on Jeff Bezos predicted by 2026 to become a trillionaire.
Yes, I saw that too.
Okay, like wow. And then all the others that will follow, 10, 11 of them from now to 2050, not including probably anyone who's going to start a business this year as a startup, which will become a unicorn business very quickly. So I want to go back to cash flow because Amazon has done so well because it's got a free cash flow model. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you have a product, it has 18 cycles on average. You spend the money once to acquire the customer, you create stickiness with the customer. And now the customer keeps buying over and over again. And it's just free cash flow. So I wanted to pick your brain on business models. You know, what are some of the things that you're seeing right now? What's your predictions on how business models need to change for the future to be successful?
So obviously one of the big themes of the future is the digital world. We're heading into a world, we know this is not new news, but it's still important to remember. Just because COVID's here doesn't mean any of these other things have gone away. In fact, COVID is actually accelerating some of them. These themes are robotic automation and AI and so on. In that world, the most important word that anybody needs to keep reminding themselves of is platform. The businesses that build a platform are more successful than the ones that don't. And what we mean by a platform is a big word. That's I call them suitcase words. You open the suitcase, there's a lot inside that word. So inside the word platform, there is, for example, collaboration. So, you know, we know the story of Amazon. It's a great example, but we could, of course, use Alibaba and others around the world that have done equally well. Yeah. We often forget to look east, you know, often only looking west.
And India, places like India have got some phenomenal business.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Ma would argue he didn't copy Amazon, he just came up with the same idea at the same time. But anyway, who cares? It doesn't matter. Yeah. These guys are all proving their initial startup point. So for Amazon, it was books, right? And it was saying, well, we'll sell books. Then they suddenly realized, well, let's resell the books. We give people the opportunity to sell the books secondhand. And then they suddenly realized, well, why can't we just let anybody sell anything? And that's an example of a platform. Again, we don't want to use the same old boring examples, but they are the examples that are used all the time because they're iconic. You know, the Ubers of the world, their thought was, well, do we need to own the assets? Can't we just let people who have the assets use the assets and we'll provide the platform? So again, Uber and Airbnb and all of those make sense when you retrofit them in your mind and you say, well, of course. So then, Reg, why can't you and I borrow a neighborhood drill? Every time I have to drill something into a wall, I've got to pull out that drill in the garage that only gets used for, Black & Decker did this work, 8 minutes of its life. Yeah, I'm sure you've got a drill in your shed somewhere. I've got a drill. It gets 8 minutes of use in its whole life. Why isn't there an app for us to the sharing app for neighborhood toolkits? And as soon as you begin to think this through, you move it into the medical field, you move it into clothing. Why can't we share clothes?
Mm.
And as soon as you suddenly begin to ask questions like that, and of course the millennials ask it all the time, you realize platform becomes a big word, and it's about
The
sharing economy,
platform, just to
ownership
recap,
economy.
building a platform, collaboration, not
Yeah,
necessarily owning things, but borrowing
yeah,
assets or
yeah.
renting things as and when you need them. These are some key things that could build out potentially the next business model for someone. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then when you start to think in that space, you then have got great examples that you can copy some principles from. And then other principles can get added into that. And these are the principles of the digital world. So if platform is one big world, then the digital world includes a number of big things. So for example, gamification. And the gamification of the world around us. We understand gamification is using and applying the principles and psychology of computer games, the way that people get hooked on computer games. Why? And if you ask the question, you get really fantastic answers. It's not just 10-year-old kids' answers. This is proper psychology and neuroscience. Then you can apply that to the science of sales and marketing and employee engagement and human resources and so on. So give you a simple example here. This might be for some bold people to try. Why not gamify people's salary increases? So most people only get a salary increase or a bonus once a year. And if we put that into the language of computer games, you've got kids like me, I'm sure they're computer gamers, the leveling up, right? So you move up the levels of a game. So in your career, if a salary increase or a bonus is a level up, happens once a year. When I'm playing Angry Birds or whatever game I'm playing, it happens once a week, right? Why don't we level up somebody's salary once a month? End of every month comes time to pay your salary, and we give you, let's say, using round numbers for effect here, we were going to give you a 6% increase at the end of the year. Why don't we give you a 0.5% increase this month? You come into my office, we have a 10-minute review because it's a monthly review. It doesn't have to be this long, complicated thing. What did you do well in the last month? What could you improve next month? How can I help you better? And well done, you actually did everything we needed you to do last month. So here's a 0.3 or a 0.5% salary increase. Compounded over the year. We do the calculations. It's the same cost to the business in a 12-month period. But now suddenly once a month, you've got this little burst of energy in your staff. We've tried this with a few of our clients, and in fact, we tried it in our own company. Older people may be a little bit resistant, but young millennials, Reg, you can't believe it. The guys are bowled over, and the energy that you bring in the system by gamifying salaries, why not? Eh?
I love it. I love it. There's some really interesting things. So really, just one of the things I noticed that you've developed recently, and you know, you're an entrepreneur, is the Future of Work Academy that you've developed.
Yes.
And I was doing some research online to look at, you know, the components, and I noticed that there were 8 critical future skills that you feel people need to develop. Is it possible to go through those briefly? Maybe 1 or 2 at least, though. Maybe the first one you've got is emotional intelligence.
Perfect.
You know,
Let me share my screen quickly for you here, just so that I can put that up online. So what we did, brief bit of background, is we did some research 3 or 4 years ago. We got a lot of clients asking us, in actual fact, Rach, the questions you've been asking me today. What is the future of work going to be like, and what are the skills that we're going to need? We also did some research into artificial intelligence, automation, with the intention of asking, what can the computers not do? So what is it that robots can't do? And both of those pieces of research actually produced the same set of answers. And we came up with a set of 8 things that computers can't do, that robots are not going to be able to do, not in the next 30 or 40 years anyway, probably in the future, yes. And then what is it that we need to develop as skills in order to be successful in the future of work? And those answers are basically the same answers. So what we need, you can see it up there on the screen, is we need the ability.
Is it possible to get rid of the one on the bottom right, the build order? There's a thing coming up called build order, so we can see the full, I don't know.
I can't see that on my screen.
Okay, just something, that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you know what? You know what we've probably got here? This is one of those cases where we should have checked this beforehand. I think you've probably got my second screen that's come up. I'll just talk this through. It's easy to talk through. I was just putting 8 things up on the screen visually for effect. It's very simple, and it's almost like one sentence that flows through. Computers can't imagine a different future. Computers do what they're told. It's not that they can't be creative, but they follow set parameters and a path. We are the ones with imagination. So we've got to be able to scan the horizon, think about what if futures. Then we need to have that adaptive type of thinking, be able to shift and adapt in the moment. And that requires a level of creativity and intuition. So that's the third thing, the creativity. And that's, I think, the one that most people realize we do better than machines. The fourth one you need is personal intelligence. That's self-awareness, EQ, IQ, all combined. And linked to that is diversity intelligence, the ability to acknowledge and value the fact that other people have differences of opinion. That one, sadly, Reg, in a COVID time, seems to be one we've lost. You know, anybody who doesn't see the world exactly the same we do, capital letters shout at you on social media. So diversity intelligence is important. Then we need curiosity and storytelling.
So we may have lost Graeme there for a bit. This is some of the glitches that you get with technology. But what I will do is, while we're waiting for him to come back and join us again, as I was going through the research for the Future of Work Academy, these were sort of 8 things that I made a note of as well, which Graeme is now going through. So one was the emotional intelligence. I think that's really, really powerful, which is having that ability to have empathy with people. I think is great. So hopefully Graeme's just going to join us again as I've been talking. So welcome back, Graeme. And
Reg, I just thought you were in rapt attention at me, and then suddenly I realized the whole screen had frozen.
That's okay. As you were away, I was just highlighting, you know, some of those things. So for me, the emotional intelligence thing, I think I really love that, because that empathy is required, especially now with the crisis. I really like the creativity and intuition. I think that for me would be my second favorite. And then the third favorite for me on your list would be this thing about curiosity and storytelling.
Absolutely. You know, that was the most surprising one for me. A lot of those, Reg, were fairly obvious, I think. And most people, you know, of course, we know creativity is something we're probably, at least for now, better at than computers. But the surprising skill that came out was that those people who have an ability to ask genuinely interesting questions, not the typical management report back type questions, but genuinely insightful questions, and then can articulate the answers in the form of an engaging story. So it isn't just a PowerPoint, bullet points, and so on. Those people have a distinct advantage in the world today. So that one was, for me, the most surprising and interesting, definitely.
Excellent. So could you tell us a bit more about how does this academy work, and how do people find out about it? What's the format of enrollment for these different critical skills that one can develop?
No, thanks, Reg. So if you go to thefutureofworkacademy.com, so thefutureofworkacademy.com, you'll see, first of all, you'll see all 8 of these courses set up. Now, I'm saying courses because what we've done is we've taken each of those 8 skills and we've built a set of courses behind them.
Brilliant. And we'll make sure it shows up in the description below for those of you on, you know, going direct to the YouTube channel. We'll make sure all the details are on LinkedIn platform, also Graeme Codrington's website, his YouTube channel, and lots of other things. So, you know, go down there and have a look. So apart from that, what are some of the other things that your organization does which could support companies right now during the crisis and beyond?
So there are three things that we do. The first is that academy. We help people understand the skills that are needed for the future and then develop courses that can help them do it. The second thing that we do is to help organizations picture what the future looks like. So we come in with a fairly typical futurist view, not 100 years from now, not the science fiction future, but we talk about what happens after what comes next.
Right.
And so we're looking at the 5 to 10 year horizon. And I think we have a great 20-year track record of helping organizations to just imagine what happens after what comes next. And the third issue is this issue of leadership development. We don't think that many organizations are actually equipped for what happens after what comes next, for those future skills. And the reason for that is you can't simply put a future focus on an out-of-date model. Right. And so we help leaders think through the business model itself and think through this shift in what leadership itself needs to be. And that's why we work with a lot of leadership schools around the world to bring in a sort of a leadership development program. It's not a once-off hit. You can't do that in a keynote situation. That's a process that you walk with a group of leaders with. And yeah, we love helping.
Graeme, maybe as we sort of come towards the end of our interview, again, it goes back to your list of curiosity. I'm curious to know your perspective on, if we look at the next 10, 15, 20 years into the future, what things will remain as they are? Okay, so for example, I've got a door handle on my door. It hasn't changed much the last 100 years. And, will that door handle be here in the next 10, 15 years? Question mark. People still have certain beverages. I won't mention brands, but there's brands out there where people love that brand. The recipe has not changed for 50 years or 100 years, and people will probably still be buying that same product in 20 years' time. And then there'll be things that become obsolete. They'll die. It has an expiry date, and things that will evolve and change into something else. So I just want to get your thoughts on what are some of the things that you believe will still be here. It's not going to change. And what are some of the things that you feel in the near future will become obsolete?
Now, there are two types of futurists, Reg. There's a futurist who would answer that question with a list. So I could go and I could say, look, I don't think you'll have door handles in 10 years' time. I think the doors will be, the Star Trek open and closed doors done on voice command. And I could give you a list. And if people go to my website and my blog, every now and again, our team dabbles in that kind of list because it's pretty cool. And the newspapers love to pick up those sorts of lists. Yeah. And those would include things like compulsory driverless cars. Right. I don't think our grandchildren will ever get a driver's license or touch a steering wheel.
Compulsory? You're saying compulsory?
Compulsory. I absolutely believe that driverless cars will be compulsory. That's the only time you get the benefit of a driverless car is if every car is driverless. I think we'll have 3D printers in our kitchens next to the microwave oven and the freezer. Our grandparents would have been blown away by a freezer and a microwave, something that can make something cold and keep it cold for long and make it hot quickly. So we could give you that list, but I dabble in that. That's not really my level of futurism. For me, the bigger question is how systems will change, because we can't predict which, something's going to emerge this year and next year that will change the world forever. That I'm sure of. What it is, I don't know. And what things will disappear that we don't expect to disappear. Again, futurists to make those predictions are mainly doing it for fun and to mess with everybody, because you can't predict the future that way. What we can predict is that there are base level human things, both good and bad, that won't go away. We will always have families. There will always be murders. We will always enjoy the pleasure of eating. Some of us will eat too much and some of us will eat too little, so we'll have health problems. And so part of the role of the futurist is to look at the systems that are changing and how they change. And maybe let me leave people with a very simple model. This is a model.
So can I ask you, sorry to interrupt you, Graeme, because again, I'm loving this conversation.
Sorry, no, go for it, Red.
So would it be an example, like you've just said, would it be a situation of, okay, we've got family, we eat, but the system behind that,
yeah,
and all the touch points of the ecosystem of eating,
yeah,
things will change and evolve, yeah? Like simple as delivery of how your products or your ingredients arrive to your door.
Exactly, exactly. And so the key for a business leader is to determine one of three things. Which things are eternal and never change? And those tend to be values rather than mechanisms.
Right.
So the second thing is which mechanisms are fads and trends. And so they come into your system and you say, oh, well, everybody get on board. And then you realize a few years later, it was just a fad. And which things are actually systems. So the underlying systems. And where we are right now, to give now I'm skirting your question. Let me give you a real answer. Anything that isn't adding real human value to the system is going to be replaced by machines in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay. I have no doubt that COVID has accelerated automation, and that the big theme of the next 10 to 15 years is automation of everything that doesn't fit into those 8 categories I just showed you from the Future of Work Academy. So if it isn't creative, if it isn't experiential, if it doesn't tell a story, if it doesn't need any adaptation in the process, within 10 years, a machine is going to be doing it. So if you are a restaurant, let's go back to this eating example.
Yeah.
And you as the manager of the restaurant or the waiter in the restaurant, if you are not adding a story, an experience, if you are not adding a human touch, a diversity element, or a emotional, empathetic response, if all you're doing is delivering food on time at a price that people are prepared to pay, a robot will be doing your job within the next decade. Because what human value have you added? And so for me, the big theme for people, the big question for people to ask is, how do we add human value, human experience to whatever it is we're doing? And by the way, that's from an airline to a clothing store. It's from the finance department to the IT department. The question is the same. What is the human value?
So in summary, humans created robots and AI, and then humans are going to compete with what they actually created.
Well, and you know what? There's a good and a bad way to say that, because actually the first way to answer that question is a really good way. All of the really rubbish stuff that we don't like doing in our lives, we should get a robot to do it. So you've got that the Roomba that goes around on the floor and vacuums your house, and you can program it to. Does anybody really regret the fact that they can no longer vacuum and sweep their own house? Is that really a job you're crying about? Now, I know you might have paid somebody to do that job for you, and that person is crying that they've lost their job. But it really wasn't a nice job to start with. And, you know, the person who packs the boxes at Amazon, yes, I know they are going to cry that they've lost their job. And as society, we have to have that conversation. I'm not by any means a heartless capitalist. I think we have to have the conversation. But it wasn't a nice job to start with. You know, going down a coal mine and digging coal out. Does anybody really love that job? Or do they just love the fact that they have a job? So we've got to make a whole lot of jobs around the world that people love doing because they're human jobs, and let the machines do the jobs we didn't like doing in the first place, but we're just paying people to do because somebody had to do them. So I don't know if that's a slight reframing of the
good.
picture.
I like it. You've got my head buzzing, you know, from platforms to collaboration to renting things out to the system. There's a whole bunch of really cool things. And the objective of this episode for our viewers, hope you've enjoyed it, was to get you thinking differently, leave you with some insights, leave you with some ideas. That's all that we can do in this short space of time. But to go back and just share once again, go and check out Graeme's website. All the details are below. You can Google Graeme Codrington immediately and everything will show up with videos and websites, Tomorrow Today Global. And there's a lot of other cool things I know Graeme is working on right now, which I'm sure he's going to release. And definitely check out his new academy so we can learn about those 8 things. So on that note, I really want to thank you, Graeme, for your time today. For those of you who've enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button, leave your comments on the ideas that you've picked up, and don't hold back in sharing Graeme's episode here with us. So on that note, Graeme, is there anything you'd like to close off with that you feel is important for our viewers today about present and future?
No, thanks for the opportunity, Reg. Just let me do what I do. I'm a catalyst for thinking. And so, as I'm sure people have seen as you've interviewed me, you've had to sort of interrupt me every time because I get going with so many thoughts. But this is what I want to leave with people, is that right now, I think the biggest danger that we have is heading into the future, trying desperately hard to just make the future a slightly better version of the past. At one level, there's nothing wrong with that. And at one level, you will survive that way. If you're a business, a family business, or whatever business you're in, you'll be able to survive. You'll have a 10% increase in your share price, or a 10% increase in your profit if you simply make next year a slightly better version of last year. But I don't think that's sustainable at the moment in history we find ourselves in. And that's not a COVID comment. That's a 2020s, 2030s comment. I think we are at one of those inflection points in history where we need to see that the future is different. Not completely different. It's not an entirely different planet. It's the same planet, but I think it's a different world. And I just think the first and most important starting point in that different world is to shift your thinking. So thanks, Reg, for giving me the opportunity to get people buzzing and thinking. That's what I like doing.
Right, love it.
If people want more of that, as they say, connect with you.
Yeah, and no doubt we'll do this again with some updates on the academy and some of those learnings that you've got there, and see you again soon. Thank you so much, Graeme Codrington. Bye for now.